So I want you to imagine if Saw and Seven had a movie child, because this movie Locked reminded me a lot of those two films. What really led me to being interested to even watch this is because this stars Bill Skarsgård, who just loves playing creepy roles, and Anthony Hopkins. And they are two obviously very talented actors. And I thought the premise of this, which I found out is actually a remake of an Argentinian film, I thought the premise sounded interesting because this movie is about how a thief, who's played by Bill, he gets locked inside of this super fancy car, and the owner of that car is Anthony Hopkins. And we get to see Anthony Hopkins just go full on psycho in this movie, as Bill Skarsgård's character is desperately trying to figure out how can he get out of this car. The reason that he gets trapped in this car in the first place is because he is a person who's, let's face it, a deadbeat father who is desperately trying to find some money so he can fix up his van so that he can continue doing his deliveries, and that also he can go pick up his kid from school. He is obviously very, very broke. He's desperate enough to break into a car to see what valuable things he can find in a fancy car so that he can go ahead and sell. Well, he messed with the wrong car because he got inside the car of Anthony Hopkins, who plays a man who is dying of cancer. And this is just his way of teaching Bill Skarsgård character a lesson. So it's another one of those claustrophobic one setting types of movies, which can go either way. I think you either going to like that trope or you're going to not like this trope. Like I said, for me, I was initially intrigued, and I think it is an interesting watch for the first maybe 30 to 40 minutes. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the few things that I did like about this. Now, because there's only so much that you can do when you are filming almost the whole movie inside of a car, this does get visually interesting. There's a couple of shots in here where there's a split screen between him being in the car and other people on the other side of the car, where he tries to get their attention and he's yelling and screaming and nobody can hear him because this car is soundproof. I did think that was a nice touch visually. And there's also a 360 camera spin when he first gets into the car and when he first realized that he is trapped in this car, that I thought was a nice touch because it's really kind of building up that suspense, because you don't even know what's going on yet. Why is this happening? And this movie gets pretty intense. It is a thriller, but there are some funny moments because this is basically a big mousetrap for humans, this car. There are some moments where, because Anthony Hopkins gets pissed off at certain things, like he hates cursing, Bill Skarsgård's character has a filthy mouth and he curses quite a bit, so he gets like zapped over and over again. And then there are some parts where that gets funny, but then that is used a lot, so then at a certain point it just gets pretty repetitive, which I think is a good segue into my negatives of this. I think I have mostly negatives to say about this. I'm kind of bummed. I was kind of excited to watch this, but the one setting claustrophobic thing that this movie does proves to be really hard to keep me engaged the whole time. I was engaged, but then there's only so many things that you can do inside of a car, and Anthony Hopkins does things over and over and over again. Like, his character does these things to the Bill character that at a certain point, I'm checking my watch. This movie, I think, is only 95 minutes long. And if you had told me it was 3 hours, I would have believed you. Things are prolonged way too long. And I did something that I usually don't do in a movie theater, okay? I took out my phone, was checking the time, and I was even kind of browsing on my phone for a bit because I was just over it. I think it's a fun concept to think about, what would this psycho rich person do to this man inside of his car because he's pissed off that you broke into his car. And that gets interesting. But then you start to sit there and wonder, okay, but can we get to the point of this? What is the end goal here? Like, there's only so many different ways that you can say this and do that before this is just beginning to feel very tired. And that's how I felt. I actually feel very exhausted after watching that movie. I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. It just went over too long. And maybe that's something that I should have seen coming by knowing what this movie is, but I don't know, I was still excited to check it out, but I was disappointed. There's actually 2 people in my theater who walked out and they never came back, and they kind of left pretty early on. I guess they were wiser for it than I was. There is also commentary in this movie about the rich and the poor and the different ideas of the wealth gap and what's right and wrong and that whole morality debate, which is interesting stuff, but not even this movie with such great actors held up for me with that commentary. It just didn't make me think about new questions. If you're going to make a movie with that type of commentary, a social commentary that's been done in other movies before, you kind of have to bring in something new and fresh. But by the end of it, it's kind of just making me feel like I want to roll my eyes, and I just wanted this story and this movie experience to be over with. They just didn't really make it feel fresh enough for me. For a large part of this, you don't see Anthony Hopkins because he is the voice in the car. That's how he talks to Bill's character. And I think some of the ADR was just kind of off. Sometimes it was kind of hard to understand what he was saying, which is important to know because he's the person who is controlling essentially this other person in the car. I did appreciate that other theme that this movie has, which is people being controlled by their environments and circumstances. And that is a lesson that Anthony Hopkins is teaching Bill's character, but he's doing that like over and over and over again. And then for us as the audience, you're sitting there thinking, I get it already. So all in all, this movie was not a winner for me. I am thinking I'm giving this a 2 out of 5 stars. Thank you guys so much for checking out my review. If you are enjoying my content, please go ahead, hit subscribe, hit that like button. It really helps me out. And I'll catch you guys next time.